Queer Relation Tips, an iAmClinic podcast devoted to helping you, the LGBTQ plus community, create the love lives and relationships you crave.
So after I got out of the hospital, I found out that my girlfriend had told my little sister that we had a secret and that we were together. So she outed us to my little sister, and I had no idea why. I still don't. Very confusing. I can only imagine that, like, the stress of the situation of me being in the hospital and the different attention that I was getting brought something up in her, and I still don't understand why, though. But anyway, the sister that she is, brought it up to me and said, what's going on? What is this? I immediately went on the defensive. I said, I don't know. She's crazy. I don't know what she's talking about. That's not even true. And I thought that I had done a good job of pushing it under the rug and kind of smoothing things over with her, that she wouldn't go and tell my parents. I think she immediately did. After our conversation, immediately went and told my parents.
In today's episode, we have a brilliant young therapist who's about to graduate with her master's degree in clinical mental health counseling, planning to set up shop in Idaho. But for today, she shares with us an incredible journey of what it felt like to be a child in the LDS community, coming out in a way that was rather shocking. Her life and her wisdom, I think, is enthralling, and I am beguiled with her story. I hope you enjoy. Let's take a listen. Maybe just kind of give us a little intro on maybe a little bit of a background, where you're from, let's set the stage a little bit.
Okay, yeah. My name is Heidi Rudd Maurer. Spent most of my life in a small town in Idaho. That's where I grew up. Cute little Sugar City, Idaho. Born in a very religious family with 3 siblings. I'm like smack dab in the middle of them. Lived that small town life for my entire life until I graduated from my undergrad, and then I got into graduate school here in Denver. And that's kind of what brought me here. It's been a weird journey, but that's kind of how I got here.
Yeah, that's awesome. Why Denver? What was it about Denver that brought you out here?
After I met my wife, I married into the Broncos fan club. He is a diehard Broncos fan. And I knew when I was applying to graduate schools that I needed something different. I needed a different environment because I had lived in the same town for 22 years of my life. I knew that I needed a challenge. I needed something different. And Colorado and Denver is very similar to Idaho, like the outdoors and camping and hiking and snowboarding and doing all of the things that we both enjoy. And going to a professional football game, so that was a lot of things kind of played into that, but most of it being we could live the life that we enjoy here.
Mm-hmm. That's great.
Yeah.
Growing up in Sugar City, with needing that change, what kind of challenges do you feel like you needed?
There were a lot of things. I think probably the biggest one for both of us was the social aspect of our lives in Sugar City and in Idaho Falls. After growing up and start, getting into the adult world of life, you hang out in these social circles, and they all have similar interests. And that was the same for us, but there was a lot of toxicity going around in those circles. That it was time for a new scene. It was time for a new scenery, to meet new people and explore the world a little bit. And we had just gotten married too. And I if you need a challenge, right after you get married, move to a new city that you've never been to before. I
I,
mean, that's the real kicker. It really was.
I can only imagine
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
much newness and getting to know each other in such a different way.
Yeah. And I think looking back, like I really don't think that we would feel as connected or really understand each other at the level we do now if we hadn't come here
Mm-hmm.
and have been challenged and been pushed out of our comfort zones. So
For sure.
all in all, it was a good decision. It's been uncomfortable at times, but it's been really good for us, I think.
Yeah. I do think often it's one of my favorite things to kind of think about and talk about, but the attachment style,
Mm,
as we're kind of creating that attachment to someone, it's not being the perfect partner that creates the deepest bond. It's actually the fracture and the repairing
mhm.
helps us create a fortified relationship, almost like when a bone breaks and it heals at that spot. It's actually more calcified. It has kind of a stronger binding in that spot.
Mhm.
That makes the bone even more structurally sound. And it sounds like you guys have had a lot of good fractures, but also even better repairs.
Yes, that is a beautiful way to put it. Um, a lot of rupture and repair this last year and a half.
Mhm.
Um, yeah.
Yeah, I can imagine I don't, I've never seen any photos or anything, but you as like a little girl in that religious Sugar City home. And I have some assumptions and I wonder if they're accurate, but do you feel like it was a safe environment or a challenging environment for you to grow up as a lesbian in that community?
Yes. Very, very, a very heavy yes.
Okay.
Um, as I think back to that environment though, in growing up in that um just religious community, um, because everybody that I went to school with, 99% of them were part of the church. They were white and they were LDS, that was the demographic of Sugar City and it still is. Um, so if you were in, any way, shape, or form different than the status quo, you stood out in a really bad way. Um, so experiencing those feelings at a pretty young age, starting in junior high, I felt like there was no choice but to hide,
Mm,
but to make myself smaller and fit and try and fit in.
mhm,
Um, but my goodness, I still didn't. Um,
mhm,
oh, I wish that like I could slap a picture up here of me in junior high because it's god awful. Uh,
mhm.
slicked back ponytail, and no makeup and wearing super baggy clothes. And, I looking back, I thought that I really did a good job of hiding me at, who I was at my core. But looking at those pictures now, um, my wife especially is like looking at those and she's like, your parents really didn't know.
Mhm.
I was just like, yeah. So maybe I didn't do a good job of it because I really was different.
Mhm.
My appearance anyway, and I think probably my mannerisms too. But um, all in all, in that environment, it was really difficult to kind of navigate those social environments without myself, leading the way.
Mhm.
Um,
Mm.
because I because she was not a part of any of that.
Yeah. It almost sounds like you were kind of a shell of yourself, most of you in the closet, and kind of this echo of you walking around out in public.
Yeah. Yeah. It was very much a shell of me, and then an internal a battle of, okay, well, this can't be me. Even though I'm hiding, who I feel like I am, I shouldn't be this way
Mhm,
because uh in the church it's very it's an apostasy. That's what they teach it to be.
mhm,
So with those kind of teachings and doctrine in my head for you know my entire life, um thinking that you are the worst thing that you could possibly be, like in the sight of Jesus Christ and the Heavenly Father and your eternal family, I think that was more soul shattering than having to hide myself from my friends.
mhm. And I'm thinking of, your parents looking at that middle schooler walking around and taking those photos. And I know that this happens in religious contexts everywhere, but it's almost like it wasn't something your parents were protecting you from, this loss of self, this dividing you into an echo and a shell, a closeted person, and kind of this ghost walking around. But it was something they were affirming, maybe unknowingly, but they were really helping create that split.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I really don't know like what how I would have experienced that differently if they had known what I was, feeling and experiencing at that age. I wonder um what their reaction would have been in terms of going to church and being taught all of the things that I was.
Hmm. Right. Do you fear that they would have maybe responded in a bad way, like a way that reaffirmed your apostasy?
I mean, the only comparison I have is to, the way that they actually responded. Um, and to me, it was affirming of that I was committing a horrible thing
Mm,
and they needed to fix it.
mhm.
But I don't know. I mean, I'm sure that my mom will listen to this, so maybe it can be a conversation. Because I'm really curious too, like what if that would have been different for me.
Yeah, I've got the pleasure of working with hundreds, maybe even thousands of parents over the last 11 years, religious parents of kiddos coming out. And one common narrative that they have been taught is that the homosexual kiddo comes from an overbearing, demanding, smothering mother and a checked out, aloof, in the clouds father.
Mm,
And I think when religious parents hear that their kids are coming out, or they hear of other kids coming out and they talk about it as parents in the community, they have that tone, that almost responsibility. And a lot of parents bring guilt into the office saying, what did we do to our kid? Or even if they're not brave enough to say that, they're still kind of calculating that in the back of their minds.
mm,
And I often see when a gay kiddo doesn't try to be straight, the parents often get really angry because it's their reputation on the line.
mm.
And I think that's a very common experience for many religious parents.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
sad. It's sad that that kind of narrative is prolific in the religious communities.
it is. It is. Yeah, and as you say that, um I think that that was definitely their reaction.
Mm, yeah. So I'm kind of thinking of this picture in my head. There's mom and dad who are holding one narrative, but also clinging to their beliefs. They're probably watching you grow up, put on the baggy clothes, slick back that hair. What part of you is in the closet? You said you were kind of trained to feel small. What part of you was left in there?
I knew from very, very early, a very young age, that I was different than my sisters, and my friends, all of my girlfriends. I just knew that I something was different. Um, in like elementary school, I refused to wear girl clothes. Like I would, when we would go like, shopping in the summer before school started, I would refuse to shop with my mom in the girl section. I would shop in the little boy section for elementary school, and I refused to do anything else. Crying at family photos because my mom wanted me to put lipstick on and I didn't want to.
Um,
Um, and then probably starting in like third or fourth grade, I my feelings for my closest like girlfriends, I think, started to change for me a little bit. They started to feel um deeper in like in an intimate way, meaning like I was yearning for more of a closeness with them than a friendship
mhm.
would have given me. Um, and
Do
those were the feelings that were um, scared me very much at first, because of everything that I was being taught. So I think for that was when those were the feelings that started to be pushed down.
Sure. Pushed down and left behind.
Yes.
I think it's very peculiar or maybe unique to the queer experience, but I don't think many other populations of people have to leave behind their desires for love, for connection, for belonging.
Mm.
I think that it's a very unique experience to say the thing that I'm dealing with, if you will, requires me to leave behind the desires that are so innocent and pure.
Mm.
And I think part of the coming out experience, I always talk about coming out as a 6 phase process, but this is the sixth phase, is to pull those desires out of the closet and say these were never dirty. And so, how do I let them feel clean in my body as I experience them after coming out? That's quite a process.
Ooh, yes.
Mhm. Because I honestly believe they live in us as an experience of feeling shame. When I want to be protected or loved or belonging or seen by the same gender, I feel guilty that I have that experience within my body, that craving in my belly and in my chest. And as we come out, to let that experience now be recategorized as innocent, acceptable, and not even that, but beautiful, that is our compass guiding us toward love and connection.
Mm. It's a difficult thing to do, though.
For sure. How do you feel like you're reconciling with those desires now in marriage?
I it's very complex, I think, because I still care very deeply about what my family thinks thinks of me and thinks of my life, um, and my wife, and the things that I choose to do. So I think when I have those moments of guilt or shame because of the feelings that I have, um, I think a lot of it stems from that sense of I will always be different than my parents and my siblings. And I don't know if there will ever be a time or a point in my life where I feel like they understand those feelings or emotions or those yearnings that I have. And I don't think that they'll ever see them as okay.
Mm,
And I think that's the part that really gets me, um,
for sure.
is that the people that I'm closest to will never condone of the love that I have for
Mhm.
my life.
Right. You know, I feel the pain here and the strong longing for them to understand. And one of the pieces again that's unique for the queer experience is, especially for those of us who grew up in religious circles and backgrounds, but we often talk of sin as a behavior. The thing, I lied, I
Mm,
cheated, or whatever it is that we did with our bodies. But for the queer experience, the sin isn't what we've done quite necessarily, but how we feel.
yeah.
And that, I think, puts a lot more shame. It inspires a lot more shame because I think the 9-year-old, the 10-year-old, the 13, 16-year-old queer person is saying, I haven't even done anything physically, but I know that I'm feeling something. And then it's not your behavior that's your enemy, it's your own involuntary body, that implicit, hungry, emotional body that becomes our enemy.
Mm,
And I think that's so devastating. It's almost like our parents are, again, they're not protecting us from seeing ourselves as our own enemy, they're inspiring it. And I don't think they understand how dark that can be.
um, I'm not sure if there's another internal dialogue that is seen in the same way either.
For sure.
Hope you're enjoying the show so far. I wanted to take a moment to let you know about a unique opportunity Queer Relationships is offering. Over the past 10 years, I've sat with people and couples and walked them through some pretty difficult times. We all want thriving lives, but creating the love lives and relationships we crave is a journey, and Queer Relationships wants to help you on that journey. We're accepting inquiries from those who want to come on the show and sit with a therapist and gain some insight into their struggles. Whether that's helping you find peace with your identity, ways to emotionally handle an unsupportive or critical family, help getting past roadblocks in your sexual relationships, or maybe ways to save your relationship that you fear is headed for disaster, we're here to help. For more information about how to become a guest, visit www.iamclinic.org/queer-relation-tips. That's iamclinic.org/queer-relation-tips. Thanks for listening. Now let's get back to the show.
How did your parents respond when you came out?
Um, well,
I know
what a
you wrote,
story.
yeah, you wrote about this in your blog that we have posted so people can go there and check it out. But yeah, give us a little bit of a snippet.
So after I graduated high school, um, well, let me back up a tad. So me and my best friend in high school, she had graduated and gone off to college. And I was a junior at the time. And I obviously had feelings for her, right? Like they were obviously deeper because, as I mentioned, um, these feelings were pretty early on for me. So anyway, I had feelings for my best friend that had graduated and moved away. And one day after school, my junior year of high school, she texted me and said, I need to tell you something. And I knew exactly what she was going to say. Um, and inside my head, I was screaming, finally, yes,
Yeah.
uh, someone was finally going to reciprocate these feelings for me. And I couldn't, it was crazy. It was, yeah, one of probably the most memorable days of my life when having that reciprocated.
Sure.
Um,
It's like finally being able to eat when everybody's been gorging at the banquet table.
yes, it's exactly what it was.
Mhm.
So we had the conversation. We made the plan when she was going to come home to visit that, we were going to do all this stuff and we were going to be a couple. And that's kind of how um, that relationship started for me. Um, but it was definitely a secret to everybody. um, so we were dating in secret for like a year and a half. Then I graduated high school and I started to have some gallbladder issues. So they decided that I needed it to be removed. So we did that in the summer after I graduated high school. Um, and I ended up having like some pretty serious complications from that surgery. So I had to go to the hospital and I spent 10 days there. I had a couple more surgeries and it was awful. But my secret girlfriend came to visit in the hospital, and it was great. It was fine, but I could tell that there was a lot of tension between her and my family, um, because I think we were getting to the point where it was like not very covert anymore. Like our feelings and like we didn't do a very good job of hiding it at that point.
Sure.
um, so after I got out of the hospital, I found out that my girlfriend had told my little sister that we had a secret and that we were together. Um, so she outed us to my little sister, and I had no idea why. I still don't. Very confusing. I can only imagine that like the stress of the situation of me being in the hospital and the different attention that I was getting
Mhm.
kind of brought something up in her, and I still don't understand why though. Um, but anyway, the sister that she is, brought it up to me and said, "What's going on? What is this?" Um, I immediately went on the defensive. I said, "I don't know. She's crazy. I don't know what she's talking about. That's not even true." And I thought that I had done a good job of of kind of pushing it under the rug and kind of smoothing things over with her that she wouldn't go and tell my parents. I think she immediately did. After our conversation, immediately went and told my parents. Um, and the next day, they took me into the computer room and sat me down and said, "Listen, your little sister told us this information. What's going on?" Um, I still, I told them that she was crazy and that was untrue, and I had no idea what she was talking about. um, And this lasted for like a day, and then I came back and I told my parents that I was gay and that we were a couple and that I was planning to go to college over there with her, the same college that she was at, and we were going to live together. And I'm pretty sure that if someone's head could have exploded, I think that my dad's probably would have.
I'm
Um,
sure. Yeah.
uh, and then that conversation led into a whole bunch more of very intense, emotional, very angry conversation.
Mhm.
Um, Very shocking, very like I just was not ready for it.
Mhm. Right.
Um, she didn't even tell me. She didn't even ask me if this was something that she could do. It felt like somebody had taken a rug under my feet and just like whipped it, and I was flat on my back and I couldn't even breathe.
Mhm.
Um,
Oh my goodness, it's such a massive betrayal and
yeah,
like a total lack of not only consent, but making sure that you'd be safe.
yeah,
So
I,
exposing.
yeah. I would love to know her rationale.
Mhm.
I don't know if I'll ever get it though.
Mhm.
Um, But yeah, that's the overall coming out story, and there's a million others after. But it wasn't good. My parents were not happy with me. My dad wanted to kick me out of the house, but my mom wouldn't let him do that.
Mhm.
Um,
Wow.
yeah.
It almost sounds like there's a pain in you where something was taken from you. And it almost sounds like it created this wake behind it that you're still experiencing. Like almost hear some pain still there.
I think I think it's because I never got that closure. And I mean, after that day, I was so furious with her, and I remember our conversations of me being so pissed off because I didn't understand and I didn't get it, and she wouldn't tell me why. She wouldn't give me a reason why. Um, and that was my like 8 years ago. Like, it's so crazy that I probably will never get that explanation. So I think that part kind of bugs me still.
Sure. It also, I'm making this up in my head, so I'll check in with you and see if it's accurate. But it almost seems like the way that you were forced to come out set the stage between you and your parents. It created a dynamic. And it almost sounds like I'm wondering if that dynamic is still at play and if some of the angst here is saying I wanted a different dynamic with my family. I was planning and prepping to set a different tone so that I could live in that context now instead of the one that you forced me into.
I I've thought about this before and I really would love to believe that it would have been different.
Mhm.
But I know my parents, at their core, they're very intense people.
Mhm. Sure.
So I don't know if there was any way that I could have planned around it to make that dynamic the way that I would have loved.
Sure.
I do think, in retrospect, that if she hadn't have outed us, um, it would have taken me a very long time to have that conversation with them. I think that shocking event for me really propelled, um
Your outness.
yes,
Yeah, like the
very
start of
much
your life.
so.
Yeah, in a
It was
sense.
very difficult, but it felt like the dam had broken and the damage was probably going to be pretty bad, but that release, um, it was amazing.
Sure. Sounds like that release was a relief.
It was relief, but then um, in the same moment, it was, "Ugh, what have I done? What have I done to our family?"
Mm.
Um, will it ever be the same? And it
Yeah.
won't. I don't think that it ever will be.
Mhm. I can almost see your dad's head about ready to explode and your mom in despair and thinking from a religious standpoint, our daughter is choosing to betray us, the eternal family, the church, God, and choosing to align with something different than who we are and make these choices. The coming out, that the dating, those look like overt deviant behaviors. But I think for the queer experience, it's an alignment, it's a going home. I like to think of it like emotional chiropractics,
Hmm.
to walk with our joints all out of socket, our back crooked. It's painful. And then as we start to come out and put everything back in its place, it's a very necessary process for us to live out of our internal emotional truth as opposed to making decisions to do something with our bodies.
Hmm.
And I don't think because straight parents ever question or become familiar with the mechanisms of their own sexuality, because they don't have to.
Mm.
when we reckon ours and reconcile ours, it's very confusing for them.
Yeah. Mm. And after that day, um, I continued to go to church because that's what they wanted me to do.
Mm.
Um, I think I was in my sophomore year of my undergrad, and it was a Sunday morning, and I was putting my little dress on to go to church, and I looked at myself in the mirror, and I said, "Why do you continue to do the things that pleases other people, but has no value to you?" And I said, "Huh, well, I think I'm gonna stop because I it's not serving me anymore."
Mhm.
And from that day on, it was like, I think that I don't need to go to church anymore because I don't want to.
Mhm.
And I should have the power to choose that for myself.
For sure. In that context, it sounds like for you, self-protection felt selfish.
Yes.
It's selfish of me to want to protect myself
Mhm.
because it makes other people angry.
Mhm. So much easier too to just do the things that is asked of you
Mhm.
instead of going against the grain and being rebellious.
Right. Right. Yeah. Or I like your phrasing. Mine might be something like going against the grain to stay intact, to stay self-accepting.
Mm. Mhm.
I often wonder if a lot of us say, I am valuable to my family because I stay closeted, because I pretend and play along. And when I do that, it keeps them happy with who I am. And then when we assert our voices and we live in our truth and we start protecting ourselves, it's so easy for the narrative to say, I am selfish, I'm hurting them, I'm a jerk, and it's my fault that they're in pain.
Mm.
And that's part of phase 6 is to say, no, I don't deserve to feel guilty, nor is it appropriate. But my self protection is good and beautiful. My voice, my life's trajectory, embracing my desires, all of those things are clean and beautiful, and I deserve them.
Mm.
Because I think that's how we start to embrace our inherent value.
Yeah, I totally agree. As I think about, this phase 6, and you said that, it takes a very long time. And my goodness, we're still in it. I
Sure.
um, because I have 2 parents, 3 siblings, 3 siblings in law. They all have different perspectives. They all um, you know, have have experienced the church in a different way and the doctrine that it teaches in a different way. And they have all had to come to terms however they have with me and Heather.
Hmm.
And that's not a simple process.
No, no.
Even if I have been ready for that process to come to an end for decades, I um and that requires patience on my part and probably should require more conversation on my part um that I haven't engaged in.
Yeah, it does take a long time. I'm 37 and I came out when I was 22. And Joe and I have dated on and off for a little while, but over the span of like 11 years. And with the George Floyd protests, um, one day my mom called me and she was like almost livid on the phone. And I was like, Mom, what has happened? And in kind of this angry but almost kind of broken voice, she said, Son, I finally get it. I finally get the pain that you've been carrying. And she said, I want you to know from now on, I will stand up to help defend you. And no one is ever allowed to down talk you ever again in my presence.
Mm.
And my parents have gone on an amazing journey. I have 5 other cousins that are queer. One of them is a lawyer, and she had an amazing talk with my parents. And I think my parents observing my joy and my authenticity and seeing what it's capable of in the world is one of the most powerful tools that helps them see the beauty that we bring and the innocence and what it's actually about. It's not about being deviant and doing things sexually with our body.
Mm.
It's about living out the love that they preach about.
Yeah.
And I think that's a very powerful agent.
Mm.
As you experience that love with your wife, Heather, I know it might sound like a weird question, but are you glad of the steps that you've taken? Are you glad where you landed?
Oh, for sure. I mean, like our whole journey, um, that's like a whole different podcast show in and of itself. I
Is that
mean,
episode 2?
there has been a lot of shit from the very beginning. Um, and as I kind of fortify this relationship with her, I think we're going on, oh no, I think 4 years in the fall, maybe five. I don't know. Oh no. um, but as I kind of look at myself in this relationship, it has really opened my eyes to how toxic and unhealthy um, my first lesbian relationship was. Like it was really, it was not okay on so many different levels. Um, and because I found Heather and she's pushed me in different ways. I do think that I'm a much better partner because of her, of her experience, um, being burned, and I've been burned, and um, I think we've just come together in such a healing way for each other that we've been able to create a really strong foundation,
Mm,
for longevity for both of us.
mhm,
But yeah, I think it's really crazy how somebody so good at their core, who they are as a person, um, can make everything else, you know, you really see everything else for what it was.
mhm, right. It all kind of the camera comes into focus in a sense, and
Mhm.
when you rewatch the video in focus, it all makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
I hope maybe a closeted queer person listening to this episode, a teen or even an adult, can hear your story as hope, you know? It's a play on words, but it almost sounds like even though you're not in Idaho, you're still living in Sugar City. You have all of the sweetness around you.
Oh, Sugar City will be always be part of my story.
Mhm.
Oh, but ooh, I have some strong feelings about that place. Oh,
I'm sure you do, but your marriage sounds like a different kind of Sugar City.
so I think so.
I can imagine that little girl with a slicked back ponytail wearing her baggy clothes, wondering where home will finally show up. I think home in our religious context with our parents and our siblings has a certain quality to it with fond memories and a lot of warmth. But as queer children, there's still this part of us that craves to feel unconditional belonging. In other words, no matter what conditions I brought to the table as a little queer child, I wanted to feel emotionally home. And that didn't happen until I came out and started dating the first man of my life. I think there seems to be a particular anger burning within me. And it almost feels like Mama Bear coming out that says, I want to protect all of us in the queer community from that splitting we have to do to survive our childhood environments. I leave my feminine, my creative, my artistic sides in the closet. I leave my emotional yearnings in the closet and put on a mask so that other people are happy with who I am. I think queer children are hiding very brilliant and creative and beautiful parts of themselves just to belong. That being trained to stay small is what feels like our emotional home from the very beginning. If I stay small, I stay home. And that, in a major way, feels like a very subtle rejection, one moment after one moment after one moment. And it's no wonder that some of us carry this subtle feeling of just not being good enough until we experience that relief and we see people celebrate our most inner core, the creative, the feminine, the queer, the gender fluid, the out, the proud, the kisses with our lovers on the forehead and the way we hold hands, our smiles as we walk around the pool, and the affection that we share at home. That as we expose people to our authenticity and they reaffirm its innocence and its beauty, is a coming home, not only a coming out. I hope you enjoyed today's episode, and until next time. Mwah.
Queer Relation Tips is a podcast sponsored by iAmClinic, a counseling practice devoted to the LGBTQ plus community with in-person and virtual counseling options available. iAmClinic. Create the love lives and relationships you crave. Find us online on Instagram at LGBTQ_therapy and Facebook at iAmClinic. That's iAmClinic.